Okay, so welcome to this is part three of the trip pilgrimage to the Holy Land pictures, and thanks for joining us. It's been a blast to be able to do this. So today we will be looking at the last few days, almost all of it, in Galilee, essentially. Because if you remember last week, if you were with us, toward the end, we essentially did the trip up to Galilee and did the boat ride on the Galilee. So as you can see, well, this is the one. So yeah, that's where we got up to the boat ride, saw the ancient boat and that kind of thing. So now we're staying up in Galilee. And so we're going to be looking at the 18th, 19th, and 20th. And so the last few days, we've seen all the others already. It's like, wow. So starts out, this is the 18th February. The theme is vocation. We're going to be going to Nazareth and seeing the Basilica of the Annunciation, the Church of St. Joseph, also the Chapel of Charles de Foucauld. That's as close as I can come to it. You know, I had more German than French when I was growing up. Then we're going to go over to the wedding church at Cana, have a blessing of couples. My sister took a bunch of pictures of the redneck parakeets that are there, and then we actually had at the Pilger house, and then we had a penance service on the shores of Galilee right near there. So starting ourselves off vocation, this was our quote for Isaac Hecker that started that day. It is the will of God that each one of us should strive to find his vocation and should follow it with fidelity. To learn our vocation and by what road God has destined us to walk is one of the most important tasks of our life. So a nice start. And so starting out, it was interesting because this is, we're on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, which is a really fun time. And, but I think the big thing was that it just is a slower pace. And let's see, 17, okay, let me find my notes here. Okay. And the neat part was just, yeah, we were slowing down a lot, and it got much more a sense of that pilgrimage kind of thing. So we woke up, shores of Galilee, you know, be able to look out, watch the sunrise coming up, you know, just trees and nature pretty much around us rather than buildings all over. And so this is their symbol. The fish is the big thing around there, as the see, that'd be German for the Sea of Gennesaret, another name for the Sea of Galilee. Just the courtyard out back, looking over the Sea of Galilee. Cloudy morning this morning, though, mostly. And very nice, lush garden, you know, everything was very green. We're at the time of the year, definitely a lot of bird life, a chickadee kind of looking. Here, and this is the building. You can see it's like nice stonework. It's been around for a while. That looks the Pilger House. They had a nice fountain out back, which has, you notice the bottom of the fountain is fish shaped. One of the administrative buildings, and you can see the more modern place where people stay now to the left there. My sister and I, the picture down by the front there, looking, the clouds are breaking up a little, and it was looking very pretty. The sun shining off the Sea of Galilee, a lot of birds floating around, and so we're getting on the bus. So to begin with, we're going to go down to Nazareth to see the Basilica of the Annunciation, Church of St. Joseph, which is right next to it, essentially. The Chapel of St. Charles Foucauld, which is in downtown, more close to the downtown. Then lunch, and then we're going to go to the wedding at Cana, the renewal of marriage vows. So that's up here, a little ways north. Sort of, you'll notice Mountain Nazareth is in the middle of the hills, and was a small, apparently a really small little place when Jesus was there. And the more modern one is spread out a bit more. But and then Cana is sort of back across, getting close to the valley, you know, so probably a little bit more well off. And then in the evening, we ended up with the penance service back at Pilger House. Okay, so traveling there, you can see the on the edge, on the west edge of the Sea of Galilee, there's a lot of high hills. Just an interesting group of kids downtown as we're going through. Uh, Legacy Nazareth Hotel and McDonald's, of course.
Mhm.
But then we get to, this is the top of the Basilica of the Annunciation. From the inside, it's supposed to look like an Easter lily. It's a pretty big dominant structure. A lot of work, fairly modern. And just looking up the hill from there, you can see it was an Orthodox church close by, and there's a mosque partly up here, but the Orthodox church is right nearby. And so we're at the Basilica of the Annunciation, and the Word became flesh. And yeah, we'll see that there's the historians tell the grotto and its surroundings, the site of the Annunciation, um, uh, already were being worshipped in the first and second century. So referred as the House of the Virgin Mary. So, it's like it really was early on. The first Byzantine church was built in the 400s, and the Crusader church, and the current one was consecrated in 69, so it's the 1960s. So this is the complex. So this is the basilica there's an upper basilica, there's a lower basilica, which has the grotto in it. We're at the front entrance. And connected to it is this Franciscan convent between, and then the Church of St. Joseph at the other end. So we'll spend all the beginning stuff around here and in the Church of the Annunciation. So heading on in, they had a lot of St. Luke, the evangelist down there and other saints. This is what it looks like from the one edge as we're getting ready to enter. There's this plaza, and it has Mary and a labyrinth around it, so you can walk the labyrinth
Mhm.
slowly. It's like, yeah, I'm not exactly sure what this is one of the guides, and he has this pointer with his fluffy thing, and he was doing something, wasn't quite sure what. Main entrance, which you don't get. Here's us getting ready. This is the actual main entrance, which essentially scenes from Jesus' life, from baptism to crucifixion, sort of like down and back up, baptism here and all. And the door had all kinds of the Old Testament prophets and such, in an old all the way through, and then and all the way around were depictions of Blessed Virgin Mary from all kinds of different formats, mostly from different nations. So Iraq, you'll notice on the left, and Andorra in the middle, and the Vatican even has one that was Paul VI there, and well, he came to actually dedicate the building, as I remember, and so you can see the building in the background.
Father Don,
Yeah.
when you started on this on this section, it had a diagram of the whole complex.
Uh-huh.
Is all of that still standing?
I mean, that's the current complex.
Oh, that is everything standing then. Okay.
Yeah, this is the current complex.
Okay.
We're looking at.
Okay.
You can see the front, what it looks like. Yeah, it's pretty much there. So we're walking. See this sheltered walkway around the outside? That's where a lot of these images are that are on the outside. There's also a bunch inside, but on the outside are those. Okay. Singapore, I mean, it's like really everywhere, and then it goes all the way around, Romania, etc. We got inside the first part, some really pretty colorful stained glass windows. Look like 1960s art, though, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
And we're on the upper level. There's the center part is open, and so we're looking down at the lower level in the grotto, which we'll see closer on later on. A slight close-up of the grotto. There's also, this is not a part that's accessible to us, but some areas where you can see some of the foundations from one of the early churches. This one I think is, from the Byzantine era church. And there's still some of the old structure from the Crusader church and the Byzantine church. Some of the building parts are still around when they built this. They kept that on the lower level. So we're now down to the lower level. The grotto is here on the right, and there's this fence that keeps us out from there. There's an altar down there and one at the other end, and definitely a lot of altars around. And we're in a we're in a line going around to the right and coming in to be able to look in the grotto itself. And so that's from the distant view. Definitely is some nice lamps. Here's Rita as we got close, and Trish and Dave smiling. Here's the peeking through and looking at it. Verbum caro hic factum est, or the word was made flesh here. As this is the Annunciation, so this would have been the when Mary conceived, and so the word was made flesh here, because that was the announcement. So it was like, oh yeah, okay. This is the altar that's on the far end, very colorful. It's like the what I wanted to, let's see. You can see the lamp at the top. You can see there's a back entrance, back stairs from an older church that came down to this level. So some of it's like you can see all the levels from way back up to now, and then in the more modern work, which is much more finished with the older stonework, and the really old stonework was really interesting. And then there, and some of the artwork, and there's Mary on the end, and some nice stained glass windows, very colorful again. Then we went to the upper church, and this is a view of the upper church. There, when we first got there was a mass going on, a group up there. Pictures, and got to have pictures with our people in. Oh, I'm on the far side. Pope John the 23rd. Let's see, was apparently dedicated by him or during him. So it's sort of neat to have that connection to us. And the sort of, I guess it'd be a coat of arms. All on the upstairs, there's all of these big, huge mosaics with Mary, depicting Mary, all the way around. This one's the American one. It's aluminum and that, and so it reflects a lot. But that's the United States one, Immaculate Conception, U.S., and the sculptor was from Pennsylvania. The woman clothed with the sun, yeah. So this one is, what's Polonia?
Poland.
Poland, okay. So this is Poland's version. Intriguing. It was fascinating looking at Brazil's, just all the different ones. This one with the net and the kids. This one, Japan. And it just was fascinating, all the different ones. Some of the different altars that were around. This is a side altar.
That reminds me of the John the 23rd cross in the Polish.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, it's got the Jerusalem cross right in the middle. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
This one is Canada. I thought really interesting because it was carved rock, and rather than mosaic, and very interestingly done. Let's see, this would have been Anglia, English, and so very colorful there. But this is looking straight up at the dome from the inside. It's supposed to be similar to a lotus leaf. I think that was what it was supposed to be, sort of the lotus flower. We're getting ready. You can see, you can look down into the lower level there. But then we got started Mass. This is the only one where I did something at the beginning. Let's see. He was leading something and talking, and I actually pulled out my phone and took these pictures. Otherwise, I didn't do that during Mass, but I couldn't resist through this. Just taking pictures of the whole group nicely there. So, yep, preaching away, and I was presiding. This was, especially as I remember, the prayers of the faithful were just astoundingly good. I wish I'd taken a picture to remember them. This was one of the places that I had the strongest reaction, spiritually too, thinking of the Annunciation and the Word became flesh. But I always think, because we read the readings for the Annunciation at this Mass, of course, because you always do the Mass for the location you're in. And so we're reading, and you have Luke's Gospel where Mary is the angel Gabriel comes, and I've always it always looks to me like, angel Gabriel is like really excited. This is a wonderful thing, Mary, most favorite. Guess what's gonna happen? And so excited, and Mary's like, there's some problems here. They stone women for that down here. You almost get that sense of a hesitancy, but then no, thy will be done. That yes, let it be done according to your will. And to me, that was like that kind of sense of, it's scary at times. The angel might be excited because what's good be coming is beyond our imagination and incredible, and yet it's sort of scary at times. And we commit anyway. And for me, that was again sort of a sense of that vocation of recommitment of my own self as priest. And it's like, yeah, it's scary at times, but no, yeah, I have to do this and trust that God will get me through whatever. So that was a very powerful time for me, and wonderful. And then afterwards, the monk is cleaning up. Very nice guy. Apparently, he's the new guy, because 2 years ago when they were here, I guess the person was a real pain in the butt and had to make sure they looked over the letters and all that kind of stuff. But Rich was like, you have to watch this guy. And then we get in there, and this guy's like really, really nice. And he's like, well, it's not the same one. But then we head up to St. Joseph. And so you notice we were down here, and then we essentially cross the plaza, head up, there's different artwork, and then into the Church of St. Joseph, significantly smaller. But the idea is that, the belief is that about there would have been, say, St. Joseph's house, workshop, where the Jesus would have grown up. So that's the tower and the convent's in front of it. There was Joseph the worker there. The funny part was everyone kept touching his knees, so his knees are all rubbed shiny, and the rest of them is the green patina. That was funny. Baby Jesus, or child Jesus with Mary and Joseph. As we're getting ready to go in, the clock tower's at the back and the front entrance is here. There's some old, from an older church, some of the stonework is still around, especially in the base. But this is, so we entered on the main level, then you can go down to the grotto level. So we were around here. There's a lower level, you can sort of see a little bit of it, but below us yet. But that grotto we don't get into, we're just down to the crypt. So this is the main church of St. Joseph, very pretty, nicely done. A lot of your artwork, again, more modern. This was one of the, I always thought was really cool, Jesus learning the trade, as it were, with his father. And so now we're heading down into the crypt level. There were a fair number of stained glass windows down here, and so easy to pick out. So this would have been the death of Joseph. He's the patron saint of a happy death because, well, what could be better than dying with Mary on one side and Jesus on the other, and being comforted for that. This would be the marriage of Joseph and Mary with the priests behind. This is the lower level stonework and in the crypt, looking down into the, there's the grotto around it, but traditional place of where the workshop sort of would have been. There's a basin down there, best guess, stairs going down, small basin collector. They're not exactly sure all of what was there, but there's mosaics from the early centuries. So, this has been a place of worship for a long, long time. And looking down in there, and people throw letters and prayers and petitions down in there. At the end, a mosaic. This would have sort of an older Jesus with Mary and Joseph at home. I suppose probably depicting teenage Jesus, maybe. So then we're looking at some of those stained glass windows again. I like stained glass windows, so you tend to get a lot of pictures of those. So this would have been Joseph with the angel, when he had the dream, telling him that was probably to get up and go. And there's a little altar down there. They could have a little chapel. But talking about his relatives, that it's like, but whether there were living, family of Jesus would have been around there, and the idea that at one point the Emperor Domitian was like, hey, looking for relatives of Jesus to persecute, decided that just wasn't worth it, so they sort of had that, and they were released in the end because they were relatives of the Lord, but weren't considered to be of any significance because they were, poor people. So here's a picture of the grotto, inside of the grotto. This was the closest we saw of it, was the pictures of it, because we couldn't go down in there, but that's the way down. They didn't let anyone in there. It would have been very narrow to try to get in and out, I guess. It would have been very, very difficult for a lot of people and for any number. So now we're back in the upper church. So the child Jesus with Mary and Joseph. And so again, the angel with, because Joseph always had dreams in Matthew's gospel. And again, the death of Jesus up on top with the Madonna and child below. Not a lot of artwork. This one was, I thought, really cool. It was like, here's Joseph and Jesus. We always see Mary and Jesus, but this one would have been, at one point, Joseph, as the father, would have been teaching Jesus. And, here's the grown Jesus. This was a very pretty one. The Jesus is carpenter. Although everyone's worshiping around him at this point, he's still just planing something the way it looks. So interesting. Then we're back out along the front, and this is back in the plaza, and underneath the current modern basilica, there's ancient parts of the village of Nazareth that they've, dug out and are showing there. So part of the ancient village is still there, bits of walls and all that kind of stuff. So it's like this is where people would have lived in the ancient village of Nazareth when Jesus was around, and Mary and Joseph. So that's sort of cool. And there's a lot of blocks. You can see they're doing a lot of, probably the grotto down is one of the biggest things, but a lot of the maintenance. And then we're back in the main square, where there's the labyrinth around the statue of Mary. Okay. And more of the smaller ones, but more of the mosaics around from the different countries. So then we're heading down the street, but it's time for lunch. And we, like 4 or 5 times, lunch was at this place called Casanova, run by the Franciscans, I gather. But the food was always really nice. And so usually buffet style back then. So we went in, it's up on the upper level. You go in and you can take an elevator up. So it's not so bad. But there's a little courtyard there, a statue of Joseph. And but then the buffet and Coke. I had a Diet Coke, I think, and but nice food, that's for sure. And then we went over, this was also walking distance in the downtown area before hopping the bus, to the chapel of Charles, what's his last name? Charles of, but he was a Frenchman who came to this area, was here for a few years, just was being a servant, more or less. Eventually, he ended up leaving to serve in Algeria and was killed there. But his stay, he made such a big impression that it actually sort of started a small community after him that kept going for a while. There's the guide. Our guide is on the very right, and there is the guide from the place that is just talking, telling us something about it. So there's a picture of Charles de Foucault, whatever it is. And so then here we were getting a little explanation. But it's a small little church, and small little chapel is all that's there, and still tries to do a lot of work, especially, there's, I think, a convent nearby, but working especially for the poor around Nazareth in the area. So there's a picture of him and praying hands underneath, kind of. So he was just a simple guy, just came and helped out. I don't know if he was originally like a nobleman or something, certainly a little better than servant, but here he decided to just be a servant. My Rita always has to have the praying hands kind of thing. So in this case, holding up, I'm not sure what that actually is. Holy water, maybe? Okay, so then, any questions? Okay, so then we headed over to Cana, put this back in just so you could see, it's real close by, sort of down the hill. But not too bad from there. Heading down, you can see we're heading back down the hill. That's just Mount Tabor. We'll see that, the transfiguration later on. Yes, I think the next day. But it's just this big hill that sticks up, pretty easy and obvious to find, that's for sure. Mount Tabor. But then we get to the wedding site. So this is one of the paintings right there, and that's the entrance to the church. But that's the Church of the Wedding. Let's see. Yeah, that was church. Yeah, that's I think what it's called. Yeah. And the idea that the wedding of Cana happened, say, somewhere around here. And so this is the church honoring that. Again, interesting old stonework. The pillars are definitely older than some of the rest, I think. But definitely this is an older church than definitely than, like, say, the St. Joseph and Annunciation would have been. Lot of work, and you can see Christ the King in the middle there, and angels on the side, and this is the sacristy, because we actually vested for this, because even though we had mass already, we were going to do sort of a renewal service for wedding vows, and so we're there, and here's the nice little nun, has everything ready for us, and let's see, and of course, they had a couple of these pictures around for people. But there was a mass going on in the church. Again, this is pretty ancient stonework. The walls of this, even though the roof is newer, but a nice little church. But we actually went down into downstairs into an alcove, some kind of chapel on the edge of things. It was really interesting. But as you can see here, again, older stonework, small. That's sort of as big as this. So we were sort of packed in there, enough room, but it's like, but to be able, and so Rich led a renewal of marriage vows. And so this is part of it, and lots of pictures around here. And all the different married couples that are here are renewing them. There's my sister and my brother-in-law. So I had definitely a few pictures of them in this. But in all the other groups, there were flowers. To all the wives had flowers, and or is it just the mothers? But yeah, all the mothers I think had flowers, but pretty much the same. But then there's, if they wanted to, was re-blessing rings, but also anything special about them. My brother-in-law surprised my sister because he had picked up a wooden one, and the right size too, and had it made or something, had gotten it, and so surprised her with that one here specially. So she was definitely surprised by this one, and but a picture of putting that on the finger, and all the blessings going on, and pictures around, and of course then they have the kiss, and we're clapping and blessing, because we did the blessing, and then some pictures. So there was this group, they were doing all the different groups, and that's ours with our family. Let's see, so that must have been at the end. This is in the middle again. This might be a little bit out of, no, that's right. We did this extra little thing at the end where we sort of gathered in the middle and had another blessing. And so then there's the flowers, and everyone's standing there with the flowers. The mothers all on the front, then we added some of the others, so everyone was together. And so then we're heading out, and it's like, there's the Cana Wedding Guest House, so you knew we were just outside and in Cana.
Did you buy any wine, Father?
I did not. This was a place to buy it, though. This was a souvenir shop. And although it's quite elaborate stuff, people who are doing some samples, though. A couple people did buy bottles, and we drank them up, at one of our evenings when we were just sitting around. I like the colorful this, and it's sort of interesting because, this one, slightly more modern, kind of, maybe more, I don't know, Catholic. This one's more Orthodox, it sort of looks like, a little more traditional Orthodox. But so we're wandering around a couple different levels. There's a lot of stuff. A lot of icons and things, especially, and a lot of these that were like chunks painted. I wasn't quite sure what they were all painted on, but all different weird shapes. And then we're walking along the wall again, and this is, the wedding of Cana. It's like, and Mary said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." And now 6 stone jars, etc., etc. All in. This one is all in English. There are a couple other languages around, but this is downtown Nazareth, or just the streets of Nazareth. And so now we're heading down country roads, heading back to the Sea of Galilee there. It was interesting because it was definitely a bit rougher today than when we had been on it the day before. And because there was a bit more of a wind. They talked about how because of below sea level with the hills around it, that you could actually get some real turbulent times, and it wouldn't take much to actually start up a pretty good sized storm. So you could see in those small boats that Jesus would have been in, the disciples, that they could have experienced a storm fairly easy and been surprised enough by it. Well, then they had these parakeets all over, and they were actually rather fun. But they're ring-necked parakeets. They're actually not native to the area, but they're pretty much infiltrated that one. They live in holes. I'm not sure if they dig them or, but in any case, they can squeeze their head out. It's like they get pretty small holes that they manage to get their bodies into, I thought. So we had to have a few pictures of that. There are a couple families anyway hanging out nearby. And then we're just walking. This is just along the Sea of Galilee. Again, you can see how high it is, because this probably all would have been growing out of, it wouldn't be growing out of the water. It would have been growing when the water was low enough that the plants could grow that way. And, it's killing off some of them at this point, but it'll probably only be this year that they have that much water. So we're heading down this path. You can see, here's stone steps going down, and you can see how they go down into the water, and which would have been, they wouldn't have at one time. Looking out toward Tiberias this is the place we're going to have our penance service. So just rock and, places to sit. And so we had a penance service and then chance for confession for everyone, where you wanted the picture there against the backdrop. And so we're joking before we get started. And an anchor. I always forget what the symbolism of the anchor is.
It's a symbol of hope.
Okay. And then so I'm doing a reading as we're starting this, and I think I preached, and then there were confessions afterwards, and then we just gathered for little celebrations, some wine. They had a small place, bar that had some few things to eat, appetizer-ish kind of things, plus drinks if you wanted them. So we just had an evening out. It was really pleasant. And you can see people having a drink and that kind of stuff.
Father Don, the anchor is also considered an ancient form of cross too.
Oh, okay. I guess because that top is a crossbeam.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
It's not that common, but it does exist.
You do see anchors around at different times, right?
Yeah.
And so we're just hanging out and having a good time. And let's see. So I think a couple different people bought some different things to munch on, and so we had just a very relaxing evening, enjoying the day. And cheers. Last couple are just so this is again from Pilger House. This is looking out over the Sea of Galilee. This would be across the way from it. Lower level would be this would be the Golan Heights on the upper level, and then the lower level, some of the cities that are on the east side of the Sea of Galilee. Actually, no, the Golan Heights would be a little bit more toward the left, but you can see some of the cities that are on top of the ridge, as well as some of the stuff along the sea. This is looking south from where we were through the trees. This is Tiberias. It's the major city that's there now. Just south of where Magdala was. Okay. So that's the February 18th, the 9th day. So we'll go on to the 19th. Our theme today was a day in Galilee. The idea, especially looking at just some of the different events of Jesus when he was hanging out in Galilee. It's like, he grew up in Nazareth area, but essentially, of his ministry, about 80% of it all happened up here and around in Galilee. So today we're going to be spending some time looking at all that kind of thing. So we'll get on the Mountain of Beatitudes. The idea of the Sermon on the Mount happened there. Then we go down to Tabgha, Church of the Multiplication of the Loaves. And then we'll get to Capernaum, just a bit north. There's a 4th century synagogue there. And then St. Peter's Church. Then we had lunch with St. Peter's Fish, which is just tilapia. And then Mount Tabor, sign of the Transfiguration. We saw the hill, so we'll go there in the afternoon, and the Church of the Transfiguration. Then we came back and we actually did some face sharing kind of thing back at Pilger House in the evening. So again, just looking around the lake and the flowers. It was always so pleasant in the morning that you ended out with a few pictures. It seemed like just comfortable. This is where we ate breakfast. This is their cafeteria. We never starved, that's for sure. Some of the things, they had little sausages. I assumed, well, let's see, I think they were mixed beef pork, but see, this would have been German place. You know, you could get away with that up north. These puff pastries in the middle had potato, I think, in them. They were just great. So, oh well. And here we are. This is, sitting table. But I mean, looking out, you can see the patio out front, looking right out over the Sea of Galilee. So I mean, really nice view. And that's pretty much the view. I wanted to focus and just sort of see, this is one of the little rivers that comes in from the east side and one of the valleys, but you can see how that cuts way down and in, but most of it is a higher, that highlands as you get into that area. Picture of us and the touristy kind of pictures. And here's me with Rita. Okay, so then, and I put numbers just to keep track of which order, because so we started up going from, we're starting where we are in Tabgha, so this area. So we're going to go up to the Mount of Beatitudes. Then we're going to come back down to the Church of the Multiplication of the Fish, which actually is walking distance from where we're staying, believe it or not. So real close by. And then we're going to go down and do those things. Then we'll go up to Capernaum and the 4th century synagogue, St. Peter's Church. That will have Mass there, actually, in Capernaum. And then we're going to head down to Magdala for lunch. And then since after lunch is on a different map because it doesn't fit on this one, so that's a different map for later. So that's where lunch and it's in Magdala. It's like, oh, St. Mary of Magdala. So we get to the Mount of Beatitudes. It's not as obvious a hill like sticking up like Mount Tabor would be, but this is essentially near Capernaum, and all the others would have been a higher hill if you're going to be up a little higher so you can talk to people. And so, blessed are the poor in spirit. So the Beatitudes are well displayed around here. They had the typical fish, so we decided that Nemo should swim the fishes. That's the idea of him swimming with the fishes. Okay. Corny, but not bad. A wonderful garden around there. Again, a lot of cacti, but which do. And a little area, this is right next to, there's a little fountain kind of thing. On the hill. Then this is the main chapel of the Beatitudes. We actually, if you remember, you were with us when we were on the boat ride, you could actually see this from the boat. We saw it and looking up Beatitudes, all nicely English version. There were a lot of different translations around. Stone floor, mosaic floor was real interesting too. St. Augustus and Noah and some of the others. Fascinating. St. Peter. They would always, every time they have St. Peter, you got to have a rooster. It's like to remind him. Oh, wow. And it's like, okay, so we're getting ready to go in. And Dave's smiling there. There's above him is a picture of the, Jesus preaching and talking. And part of me, is as wonderful as, and the two things that part of it, one is, the Beatitudes, we've always sort of seen, blessed are the poor in spirit. I mean, somehow embody in some way a core of Christianity, really hard to define, and yet having some sense of if we are living this out, peacemakers, and all those things that just are really, it was really profound there. Although part of me always goes back to Monty Python, and it's like, what did he say? Blessed are the cheesemakers, I think, sorry, it's like that always pops in there too. But we can make fun of things that are important. So, but that this is part of that wonderful sense of what he proclaims. So the Beatitudes from the Gospel of Matthew, and okay, so Paul VI. This is the inside of the chapel, nice, modern kind of one again, really nice. You went around. I assume they had mass here occasionally. The groups that one time they actually stayed right near here rather than Pilgerhouse, although I think Pilgerhouse was a lot nicer place right along the Sea of Galilee. So those are Beatitudes around the top. And on the side toward the Sea of Galilee was this image of Jesus surrounded by some intricate stonework. Found that rather fascinating. And a prayer place, although this was inside the area that was roped off for us. There's the tabernacle. And, okay. And then, this was actually just it was interesting because this is like peeling. It's someone had pasted this up or something, but, do whatever he tells you, sort of. It's like, you do to the least of my brothers, you do to me. So I have no idea where this came from, but it was like, oh, interesting. This was donated by Paul VI when he was visiting here in 1964. So a stole, and which interesting is right next to that peeling kind of that symbol of Jesus. Right, if we're looking, like behind us would be the chapel of the Beatitudes. Right across the way here this is a pilgrim house again, place for pilgrims to stay, and around there. And so if you want to stay right up on the Mount of Beatitudes, there's a group from certainly somewhere in Africa there, and gathering together and having a good time. This was the view. You can see right down. I mean, no problem. We're just up on a bit of a hill, and wandering around a little afterwards. So a nice picture of the building itself and the grounds around it. This rather just this fountain going, little waterfall kind of thing. And this one was interesting because we're heading down, and Maher suggested the possibility of, if we're just coming down just off the mountain, so we're just almost at the top coming down, but there's this nice little curved valley, and you wonder, it's sort of a little bit amphitheater-like, and so maybe Jesus was not necessarily at the top, but actually sort of at the top of the amphitheater, so it would pull people together a little bit and make it a little easier for them to hear. So, it's like somewhere in this area, likely. But then we went down to the Church of the Multiplication of the Loaves, so the feeding of the multitude, and Tabgha, which is sort of modern-day areas south of Capernaum. And so they had definitely some pictures and some representatives. The idea that if you look, all the different healings, so much of the stuff happened in this area. The first apostles, Sermon on the Mount, healing of the woman with hemorrhages, healing of the leper, the miracle of the multiplication, Jesus walking the waters, preaching and healing in Capernaum, woe to unrepentant cities, meeting with Peter and his companions after the resurrection, and the last appearance in Galilee. I mean, this all happened in a very small area around here. Which is like, wow, really true when you think of it. So the feeding of the multitude, Church of the Multiplication. Let's see, if I remember correctly, our place that we're staying is just to the left a little bit. And so that's a close-up of all the different things, references to Jesus in Galilee. So this is the outside of the Church of the Multiplication of the Loaves. There was a good-sized group ahead of us, so we decided to hang out around the outside. But again, the churches, there was a first century one. It's the area around, again, it has springs, which is one of the reasons that it tends to be, you put cities there. By the end of the fourth century, there's a church already. That's the first church. And maybe the fifth century, the Byzantine built an atrium, second church, a bit longer and bigger. The mosaics were put in. There's a standard mosaic with a breadbasket and fish. We'll see this around. You can sort of see this up here. It's very, very common around, and it's often a depiction, or down here too, a depiction you'll see a lot around Galilee in a lot of different things, which is interesting. But the oldest version of the mosaic that they have is at this place. 7th century, church is destroyed. In the 1800s, it's bought by the German Association of the Holy Land and excavated, and so they're finding the different levels and different churches, and then they build the current one. And so that was started in the 1980s. And okay, so you can see a little bit of that in the atrium. So we're hanging out outside. Yeah, you can see, oops, sorry. Over to the left here is actually, one of those signs. So they were just right there on this area, and we had a reading while we were, since there was the other group in there, but we did the reading of the multiplication of the loaves, and one of those grinders around the back, mostly for olives at one time. Then we're getting inside to the atrium. They had fish and water inside, so this is that first atrium area. Very pretty, nice. And then now we get into the main nave of the Church of the Multiplication of the Loaves. The interesting thing is you can see how it's modern up top, but there's some old flooring from the Byzantine era, typical of that era, but you can see, but very nicely, preserved, so you're not allowed to walk on this anymore.
Is that another pelican?
This one looks more like it's not really a pelican.
Or like a heron.
Lingo. No.
Yeah, and different birds, because this looks more like a well, actually, yeah. I'm trying to think. This does like a pelican, sort of flamingo more. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
Although the coloring would be wrong, but this one looks like a duck, maybe a couple ducks there. But again, the long legs are more typical of a flamingo, I think.
Or a goose.
Stork. Could it be a
I
stork?
guess.
Or a heron?
Or a crane.
Heron? Could be. Gray herons, yeah, that wouldn't be a surprise either. Plenty of those around there. Okay.
Father Don,
yeah.
you made a point a couple of slides back about Jesus in that sort of curved area,
Mm-hmm.
with this, and he didn't go far. And I don't think a lot of people realize that Jesus was in a pretty tight range, because he did mostly walking. Some animal, in that, but his distance was very confined, as opposed to somebody like St. Paul, who was really traveling man.
Yeah. Of course, St.
with
Paul
that.
took advantage of more, at that time, modern travel of boats and such. But yeah, no, it was like this whole area here. And he would have been down to Jerusalem several times, but they essentially walked down the Jordan Valley, which we'll see coming up, and then stopped at Jericho, and usually stopped at Bethany as you're heading up to Jerusalem, because you're also talking about at least a 3,000-foot climb to get to Jerusalem from there. But yeah, because that's the way, if you're coming up from more normally, you'd want to go from Galilee, you'd just come straight down the Jordan River. Now, since part of that was Samaria, some Jews would cross over to the east side of the Jordan and come down that side, as opposed to going through Samaria. But in any case, because that wasn't Jewish, sort of funny actually. But so here's the altar there, though, in Church of the Multiplication. There was a place for people, to light little candles. Jesus at the book again. There was another mosaic on the floor, dating from again, all birds, which is intriguing. Although this almost looks like a snake. It ends, so you can't tell, but it almost looks like a snake. It is a snake. There you can see it. Okay, on the left. And but it was interesting that it was almost all birds. And I'm not sure they had any explanation of anyone. There's your peacock.
Hmm.
You can see the tail, which is a sun. And then we headed up north a little ways. It was not real far to the town of Jesus. And picture with us there in the Custodia Terrae Sanctae, so in the Holy Land, the Franciscan friars in the Custodia Holy Land. They actually had one of these there, the homeless guy on the bench thing sculpture that you see around, to remind us. But here's some of the old stonework they have displayed there, and a lot of the ruins and palm trees, and that's the 4th century synagogue. We'll see a little closer as we're coming up. So that this is, yeah, a synagogue. It was a grand synagogue from the 4th century, a really big one, built over the top. And right next to it are all these ruins. The thing that I found interesting here is, you know, you look at the rock, but if of the synagogue is again that light brown limestone. But you'll notice all the rest of this here, if you look, the deeper ruins are all basalt. Yeah, so the area around Capernaum had a lot more basalt, but there's a lot of limestone around, so they dragged it in from other, nearby, but it's not the native thing. You also just know there's the dome of that Greek Orthodox monastery on the other side there behind it. But yeah, I found it interesting. This is the only place we saw a significant amount of dark rock, of basalt rock. My guess is that, most of the places you see a lot more, but it's a rift valley, so you'd expect some of this. But the essential interesting thing is, and the lower level is again dark rock, basalt rock, but this is a late 4th century synagogue built on the white one, the white colored rock, but it's built on the remains of it was a smaller synagogue, but the synagogue underneath, which would have been the synagogue at the time of Jesus in the city of Capernaum. So it was destroyed. They built a new one on top, but essentially was right here, would have been the synagogue that Jesus would have, unrolled the scroll and things like that. So Capernaum, private houses around. So this was the big synagogue that was put on top, which was larger than the one at the time of Jesus, but the grand synagogue. Okay, so you can see again the steps going up, but some of the lower courses, which are still the dark rock. Looking out again toward the Sea of Galilee side, we'll see a little bit more. This little building that you can see just a teeny bit, very modern building, is the Church of St. Peter at this point. And so we'll see that more because we actually have Mass in there. But again, these are all excavations of some of the buildings around there. They use stone for most of the lower level work because, they weren't like us, that they had a lot of wood around, or big long chunks of wood. So we're wandering around the synagogue, and you can see some of the older, it's been repaired and built up again, but some of just the old stonework that's all around here. And looking off the edge down to some of the older buildings around it. Rita praying. Whoops, okay. And just another look again at a little closer at, here's doors and walls and all that kind of stuff, all having been excavated out. So a lot of this dates from the 1st century and before. So there's a lot of ruins around here, and then it doesn't take long before you get into green fields.
Is the excavation continuing?
There was no evidence of it at this point, but I think they might do a little bit periodically. It seemed like, from the signs I saw, it didn't sound like there's anything going on right now anymore, that they've found what they want to. So we'll see. It doesn't look like there's too much below, I have to admit, and then down right by the gallery there was just this area with trees and benches to sit quietly. We had some little things. There's, some of the old, oil presses and such around there. And that one is the administrative building, but it looks a lot like Pilger House. So maybe it was built by those Benedictines again, German look. Again, some intricate levels in some of the rocks. Looking across some of the ruins to what is St. Peter's Church. So we'll see that as we get closer, the plaza out front. This is looking, we'll see a bigger one of St. Peter's. This is looking underneath St. Peter's Church. It's built suspended above this. This area has first century church, a later church, and also some evidence of a house that was more or less the church was sort of built out of. But we're talking some of this dates from first. We're talking like shortly after Jesus died, kind of. It's thought to be like the first Christian church. It's in Capernaum, built perhaps on the belief is on St. Peter's house. Remember that they visited his mother-in-law was there, and so you can see how it's the current one. When they built this, they suspended over the top of all of that stonework, so it sits above it, and you can see it protecting it in that sense too. But then having it also still on the same location, so you can see some of the effects of the octagonal stuff underneath there at the time. So this would have been the synagogue, some rooms between, and then this is believed to be a church sort of built on top of a church that was incorporated as part of the house complex of St. Peter at the time, right on the shore of Galilee. So intriguing, huh? So time of Jesus, house of Peter was close to the lake shore on the east, north, south by the road that went through. Let's see, spacious courtyard, staircase was there. 4th century was another church built on top of it. The 5th century was the octagonal church parts, and then but underneath is believed to be the house of St. Peter, St. Peter's Church. So then we went inside. This is the main altar. Of course, we had our there with our intentions, but an interesting mosaic on that altar, very colorful. As they're getting ready for Mass. There's a glass floor, so you can actually look down at the ruins just down underneath and look right through the floor to see it down into those ruins from the different churches dating back all the way to earliest the 1st century. Then we had Mass, of course. I got to preach this one. And let's see, and he presided, and then afterwards we're looking around. And yeah, you can see again the glass floor in the middle and different groups that are there. This was interesting. They had all of these works. Again, these are elements of, Jesus doing things as in the area of Galilee around. And depictions, I was trying to figure out whether these would, at first I thought they were wood carvings just mounted, but I was never quite sure because I wasn't going to touch them. But they have the wood color, but, okay. And the slot look, but so I assume they were wood. And the healing, the guy dropped through the roof and being healed. So then we're outside, getting ready. So again, Church of St. Peter, so plaza, and on the one end looking up the hill, just was sort of how green it was always sort of amazing. And then here is, you can read at the bottom, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." Matthew chapter 16, 18. So here's Peter with the keys and the staff. They had to have a picture of me there. I was sort of told, stand there, we're going to take a picture, because, Peter and priest. Okay. Lot of cacti around here. No swimming, though. Not that any of us were going to, but it was interesting. Just a lot of it. We're taking some pictures along the shore, again, looking south. Sea of Galilee, you imagine this huge monster thing, and it's like, it isn't quite that big. It's about 14 miles long and about like 6 to 8 miles wide, I think. But it was a pretty day, nice blue sky. Definitely hazy. It was definitely humid around here, which is apparently very common around the Sea of Galilee. Even though there's cacti all over, it's still, very humid. Looking down toward, you can see that cleft that right near Tiberias. Big shade tree, which we were relaxing underneath. And it was quite comfortable, slight breeze enough. You wanted long sleeves because it was not quite warm enough, except that, It still wasn't too bad, though. Then we went to Tangerine Galilee Restaurant, and the idea there was St. Peter's fish. And you could get it whole like that, or you could get it fillet. I went fillet. But uh, let's see, Dave definitely did the whole fish. And so, okay. But tilapia. And it was actually very good. It's a nice fish, and they prepared it well. But it was like the traditional thing you just have to do when you're in Galilee. And the fish, well, and it would have been certainly one of the primary fish that Peter, as a fisherman, would have caught. As they're getting, there's a little shop next to it, so people were looking at that too. Okay, so then so we ate fish at Magdala. So then we're going to head down to Mount Tabor, up to the site of the Transfiguration. There's ruins of several churches around there, and there's the current Church of the Transfiguration up there. And then in the evening, we're going to come back down to our place, Pilger House, where we're staying, and have some evening faith sharing. Okay. So heading to around Tabor, this is, I believe, the modern city of Nazareth, which you can see, that area you could see well. The older city is a little farther on the hills on the far side, but it's just been built up over time. But it's, again, in the hill country, as it were. And let's see, looking down, you can see down into the plains that we're heading up. There's a city around it that you sort of drive through. When you get to the place where the buses all stop, because you have these little teeny buses that go windy roads, like 15 passenger types that go actually the rest of the way up. So this is the place you hang out for a while. A little shop, and some of the pictures of the stuff. So Aaron's blessing. Of course, Rita's taking these pictures because the hands. She loves the hands holding, that kind of thing. And so I threw some of these in there. So you can see some of the things, but I couldn't resist the box down below. Here's a close-up. Made in China. I thought that was really funny, but it was nice. But so we're heading up the hill at this point in one of those little buses. As you can see, here we are, taking pictures as we're going up. Looking out over the plain of Megiddo at this point. You can see the hills along on the north side of the plain, or also the Valley of Jezreel, the more modern, more oftenly called that. But you can just see it's nice, flat, and open, and a lot of good farmland. Although there's grazing going on the hill as we're heading up. Now we're to the top. You can see part of the Church of the Transfiguration there in the distance. Private property, the Transfiguration, DNIC. I haven't figured out what that meant. But land, again, also very, very green. This is the Franciscan, there's a Franciscan monastery up here too. And Pope Paul, I believe, again, I get a picture of him, just the courtyard around there. Francis with Jesus, because Francis always is often depicted in scenes with Christ. Here's the, an older chapel. You can even see the altar at the end, sort of benches, that kind of thing. So one of the ancient chapels that was here at one time. And here's more of the building and chapel, and transfigured here. So Jesus transformed before them. So it's just quoting the Transfiguration. Here's a Benedictine chapel. I don't know why I needed the bars on there. It's probably to keep people out, but you can see some of the old stonework, again, an archway. Just the view again from up top. There's a little path down here, but again, looking out of the plain of Jezreel or Megiddo, and there's straight down in the path, and old stonework that's been around, you can tell, for a lot of years. Catching stuff. This is looking toward the southwest. A little close up was interesting, just looking down into the valley, these little, small little communities. And again, mostly farming in this area. So now we're looking at the Chapel of the Transfiguration. And we didn't get to go in right away, but so we ended up going up and to see this area to the right that has these railings. And so we went up there first. And one of the things you saw right here on the right side was a baptismal font from the 4th century. So that's some of the mosaics again in the bottom, but that was a baptismal font from the church in the 4th century that had a ladder in for people. This would have been some of the earliest churches in the area, and some of the stonework from that era. And some pictures as we're up here, a little breezy, but nice. There's a little cooler up here. We missed the rain, but not by too much, because there were definitely some showers around. But here's some, again, a view from the far side of that chapel. You see all the stonework. We ended up having a small prayer service while we were up here. And so, in this small little outside chapel, ancient stonework, modern roof, which would have kept the rain off if it had rained. An interesting picture of, look at the woodwork underneath on this cross is very nice. And prayer, and oh, there's a close-up of it. Okay, so very pretty, and probably a lot of it is olive wood, which has a lot of intriguing color. So okay, so now we're going to head into the Church of the Transfiguration. Really pretty, very nicely done. A lower church again and an upper level. And close up, there was a group having mass down on the lower level. We were appropriately quiet, even though we were taking pictures. Above him, in the overdome is the Transfiguration, Moses and the prophets and the disciples looking on like, what the heck's going on here? And,
it looked like in that chapel, back 2 slides, it looks like it picks up peacocks or something.
Oh yeah, we'll get some better views of that once they were done. So let's just keep going, yeah. And side chapel with Mary and angels. Some of the, again, mosaics, part of the floor preserved the mosaics from the 4th century church, Byzantine look again, or 5th century, I think maybe. Some of the dome, this one small area we regathered, this is it Ezekiel, I think. It was the one where, the priests of Baal, are supposed to, well, why don't you get your priest to, ask Baal to start this flame and burn up the sacrifice, and I'll ask God, and taunts them a while and has them pour water on his 3 times before asking God to, and the thing goes. So I think that's Ezekiel. And, but yeah, it's a famous part and sort of interesting. It was fun how he taunts them, actually. But we're down, there's some old stonework in the middle of this too. And again, part of the ceiling, this one, you get the Franciscan Jerusalem cross, but you also get this symbol. This is a common one for the Franciscans in the custody of the Holy Land. So that's this is, Jesus' arm and Francis's arm. So he had the stigmata, so the same wounds, and so the idea, that they always have the 2 arms with the cross in the middle is one of their symbols that you see a lot. So here we're in this little chapel, and this is Moses with the tablets, and some, I guess, either eyebrows that are shining or something. Probably God's special blessing. But so we're crowded in, and it's like, more or less here, we're just taking pictures and hanging out a little bit. Again, intricate wood on the door. Some of it looked awful heavy. This is definitely an old cross. I have no idea from when. Then we're back in the main church, looking up at the top of the nave and the woodwork that holds the roof up. Basilica style, you can see, with the walls and the high clear story, the windows at the top. And another symbol of the cross there. Okay, more of this. So then they were done. So this is down in that chapel. You can see and we'll get better pictures. So there's the angels on either side, and baby Jesus at the bottom, but protected by angels, and then the peacocks at the other end. Symbol, yeah, again, of life and resurrection, I think. It's pretty. So then we're wandering out, and some of the work around it, again, it's just sort of rather interesting. Better keep moving because I have one more day yet to cover.
Mm-hmm.
This is taking longer than I thought. We could wait, but we could just do it anyway. It won't take too long. So then we're back. It was, yeah, again, there were some storms around, so it was darker and the river or the lake was a lot rougher. So then we had our face sharing time, just hanging out. We had some beer and wine for people that wanted it, but otherwise, and a few hors d'oeuvres, but really sharing what it's been, everyone taking some time to share what it's meant with the trip so far. And, here we are on the mountain of the Transfiguration, looking how Jesus is with us. There's my sister on the far side. Okay. Whew. I think the last day will go a little bit faster, but okay. So this is our last day, living out our baptismal vows. So we start out at the Church of the Primacy of St. Peter. So we were on his home, a little earlier, but and then we go down to the baptism site of Jesus. And then after lunch, we go to the Tomb of Lazarus, Church of Lazarus, and then dinner at the Ambassador Hotel in Jerusalem before heading to the airport. But okay, so we started out with the Church of the Primacy of Peter. Right to begin with, since it's me, I had a couple really pictures that I really enjoyed this is the cross down by our Pilger house and right on the shore of Lake Galilee with the sun shining right behind it. It's like, that one I just couldn't resist. To me, it was, again, it's sort of like, the crosses of earth, but somehow there's always that shining light of God that seems to be just coming out around it and coming forth from, and so it's like, again, I think almost in terms of, we're like that. Our actions, our human actions doing human simple things, and yet somehow that light of Christ can be shining through us and illuminating our world in so many ways. So that's why I really like this picture. Okay. Looking down just the Sea of Galilee in the morning. Look how much water is over the top of all those bushes and brush, and having to look at some of the trees around because they just were so beautiful. And this is our last day, so we're looking, and there's the fish that's right by the place where we're staying. And so, okay, last one, because now we're leaving this for good. Everything's packed in. So then we had, starting out, we're going to go down to the Church of the Primacy of Peter. This is what it looks like. It's, again, something we saw very well from when we were on the boat on the Sea of Galilee. It's the place where it was in Greek was Heptapagon, which, interesting, eventually got sort of shortened and translated, became Tabga, Heptapagon, but the original Greek meant 7 springs. That's what it meant. And you'll see some of the water around there. So here we are coming down to it, and it's at the very bottom of this, but at the very top, the buses let us off just behind us, and looking at that. But right to the right is, these little, some of the springs and guided ways where they have the water that's constantly coming out. So they're extending it down to one of the springs is like right there. There's a group having mass in one of the little outside chapels. Tabga. St. Paul the sixth was here in one of the places he came, and so this is the Church of the Primacy of Peter. Down on the shore, the people that it's, the guide said they've never seen such a small beach here. So there's a lot more water. Looking at the church. The thing is, and this is what it's remembered, is after the resurrection, when the disciples go fishing and, and they're not catching anything, and this person from shore comes out, well, try the other side. Oh, okay. And they do. And they get this huge number of fish, and they come in, and Jesus is cooking some fish. And then right afterwards is saying to Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep. And so this is the place where we remember that. And right on the shore of Galilee, a very possible spot that would have been where he was, Peter, after denying him 3 times, affirms that he loves him 3 times. And so we're just getting ready. There's the beach, very short beach compared to, I guess, normal, and the rocks, the holy ground. The idea is the rocks were where this really happened. There's Maher. There's my brother-in-law down on the stones. There's the stones looking from the other way. Okay. A little farther on the beach, looking up. This is the symbol of the Holy Land, of all of the Franciscan custody, the Holy Land places. This is holy ground. This is a little down looking. You can see some, again, the palms that are underwater just a little bit. And thy word I'll let down thy net. Okay, at your word, I'll do that. And so this is one of the deeds that Jesus, this is our little amphitheater they're setting up for Mass. And so that's where we're going to have Mass. Very nice. It was a beautiful day. So it was very sunny and all. So a perfect place to be out for this. Getting dressed, and I presided, he preached this time. We took turns. Here's our fish with the intentions on top, and different Mass. This was really cool. And this one, these next couple are my favorite of these, because here is, excuse me, in the front, and then in the back is Jesus and Peter, feed my sheep. And one of the guys, gave me these pictures, is like, wow, these are really cool. And consecration, again, with the feed my sheep in the background, and one of the boats. So this is inside the primacy of Peter. This is considered the traditional place of the table, the place where Jesus served them. And so that's what that means. For prayer only, they don't do Mass here. We do Masses all outside. And there were a lot of pilgrims around for this. So it means the table of Christ, Mensa Christi. I did all these translations and looked them all up because I don't know Latin enough. And at the time I didn't, I could have just talked to Father Bob and he'd have known it, but was just doing this mostly when I was sometimes late in the evening. So here's the end. Here's looking back toward the front, the entrance. You can see the doors. There's one of the Franciscans sort of keeping track of things. And so this is like one of the other outdoor chapels. So it has Pope John Paul II when he's here. Very nice picture of that. Pope, this looks like, is that Paul? No, it doesn't. It looks like, not quite sure, but but different pictures of that. So then, yeah, we're getting ready to go. This was, the rock hyrax, one of the animals mentioned in the Bible, according to this, 3 times. But some of the signs, but we're just looking out again at the Sea of Galilee. Last picture of the church. So then what we're doing, and so we're starting out up here, right at near Capernaum, Tabgha, right there. And then we're going to go around the north side of the Sea of Galilee, all the way down, cross back over the Jordan River, go down the river valley, because you can see the river right along here, all the way down to Jordan River Valley, down to here, which is about where the traditional site of the baptism of Jesus by John is. So that's our next thing. So we're going to go around here. Whoops. Come on. Not sure how that goes away. So Jordan River up top. Okay. So as soon as we're starting out here, we go by Capernaum. And if you remember that little dome on the top beyond Capernaum, that's this thing. And I looked it up just to sort of find, and it's actually a Greek church and monastery, Greek Orthodox church and monastery that's right there. And that's the church part, and monastery over here. And we saw it several times. It's like, oh, I had to figure that out. But it's just on the north side of Capernaum and really close. So here's some of the ruins around it. As we're heading north, we're just taking pictures. The sun is flickering off. We're crossing the Jordan River on the north side. This is the Jordan River. Running very high for normal because they had a very wet winter and everything is running a lot of bank full, more than normal, because it can be as low, somewhat more of a trickle. So here it's doing pretty good. And then we're heading down across, there's other little streams coming in. This is looking out the window as we're driving around the northeast side of the Sea of Galilee, looking into areas this would probably be called, the Golan Heights. What I didn't really remember, but was that there's a several mile strip all around, the lake, Sea of Galilee, and going along the Jordan River to the north that has always been part of Palestine, has always been part of then modern Israel. But it's only the heights above it that after the war of, that Israel took over from Syria, because they were shelling from up in the heights and down on the Israeli troops. But some different old, again, here you can see some, we weren't sure what, but we're driving by some old ruins. Again, very green, a lot of stone around though too. down into one of the traffic circles. Here's where we're crossing. The reason this one is interesting is this water down here. This is the Jordan River on the south side of the Sea of Galilee. They actually have a dam that controls things, but the dam, they actually had some of the floodgates open because they didn't want the Sea of Galilee to get too high. So there's a lot of, but it's green going down. This is on, we'd cross back over, so we're on the right side. This is looking west on the hills to the west of the road going down as we're driving down the valley. Very green. But you notice, except for a few sort of drier bushes, nothing's real tall. We stopped in this one town. It was actually a rest stop kind of thing for us to pick up a little anything to drink, but they had a little tank sort of sitting there on her, and also the Coke trash can smiling at you, which was interesting. So the cat who ignored us totally. But just looking down again, you can see why they're shepherds, because sheep can still get something out of it. A lot of caves, again, all over. Palm trees in the bottom part. That was always the most interesting thing. There were always so many caves all over the place. You can just see them all over here. And looking across the Jordan River to the east, so that's Jordan on the other side, and on the Jordan River in the middle, down in the bottom of the valley. There's another view of that looking to the west, to the east, I'm sorry. Now we're back on our side. It's getting rockier as we're getting farther south. And it did get, but you can see some of the caves that just are there. And birds were hanging out. They were riding thermals in this one area, the way it looked. Still sheep, plenty of those around too. Some palm trees where they were no doubt watered. Then we get to the baptismal site, identified as the place where, and lots of, there's I think another location that wants to claim it, but this is the pretty much the one that says this is the site where it was also commonplace where you would cross if you were heading east from through and going to head up the highlands on the other side. So a place where Elijah the prophet ascended in heaven, but also the baptismal place where John was baptizing people. Okay, so here's our view of it. One of the first, okay. So one of the interesting things, this is Jordan across the river, different country, and Orthodox church that's over there and such. But notice this palm tree right in the middle. And you can see that you go down and you see how it's underwater. Here's the water level. And here's one I pulled off the internet from the other side looking back. And here are these trees that are underwater for us then, but look how much farther down normally the Jordan River is. So there's, these are underwater. They're actually on a platform, and there's still steps going down another 4 or 5 feet down to the River Jordan, where they would do these Christian groups would do baptisms there all the time. So the water is, like about this high. So we're talking, probably 8 feet higher than normal. That's like a lot of water. And so they weren't allowing anyone down there. And this is just looking across Palestine, or the Jordanian side, and Orthodox Church of St. John the Baptist over there. But looking at here, what they had set up was a pump with hoses. So all these people that want to get baptized, well, you got to be baptized by the hose because you couldn't go down in the Jordan River because it wasn't safe. And so they were doing, the hose baptisms. It's like, okay, I don't know how many kinds people would do that. That would be interesting, but ooh, huh. And so a fair number of them along with us all around. This was just fun. Here's the Israeli side flag and here's the Jordanian flag on either side of the river. There's stuff, there's Trish. And this is a good view you can see the river pretty high. You can see where the floating platform, but actually there wouldn't be much room to be able to do anything on in here. Well, normally the platform is a lot lower and other platforms behind it are underwater, so they weren't using it all on the other side. There were no pilgrims or people at all over there. There's me and Rita. This one is, so this is looking across again. So the Church of St. John the Baptist there. Let's see. This one was so that's Orthodox. Let's see. I don't remember these right now. Although, look at the interesting artwork with those arches. Looking south, you can see a couple more down that way, closing in. This is a Russian Orthodox pilgrimage house. And then this is a monastery, Greek Orthodox again, if I remember when I was looking that up. Okay, so then we finished up there, and we're going to be from the site of the baptism. So then we're going to go do lunch in Jericho, and then head over to Bethany, which again, still in the West Bank territory, to see the sanctuary of Bethany, which includes the tomb of Lazarus and the church of St. Lazarus. And there's a small museum there that was part of, it looks like a convent at one time. And then after that, we do dinner, and then we're heading to the airport. So our last day. So this was right, the parking lot right by the baptism site. So we're going to be heading out of here. The Israeli checkpoint was actually just up over this hill, or you can see the building right there. So in order to get back into the proper part. So here we're having lunch in Jericho, and baklava, gotta have a little of that there. It was not bad, not quite as good as mine, but not bad. And outdoor was very comfortable. And looking down, this was interesting because there was water in this little stream, which again, most of the year you'd never see water in. Looking out over toward, just was interesting is this is the Mount of Temptation on the other side of Jericho. And the mosque over there. And this was the place that we were, the name. I have no idea what it means. And so then we're heading back in toward Bethany, and here's one of the Israeli settlements with nice high walls around it. Then we're getting ready out by the sanctuary of Bethany, where the tomb of Lazarus is, and you can do camel rides if you want. That camel looked pretty, I don't know, he looked sort of like, I'm above the rest of you. But sanctuary of Bethany, and so we're heading up the hill. That's the Church of Lazarus right there. Some older stonework that's around there, as well as the more modern church. So this is Bethany, a few kilometers from Jerusalem on the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives. Historically, the final resting place for those who traveled to Jerusalem from Jericho. They would rest up here before heading the rest of the way in. No one's sure exactly what it means, but the Roman road ran near here. Jesus and apostles are believed to pass their way to Jerusalem from the Jordan Valley here. So it was a common place for that. Tomb of Lazarus is identified as Mary and Martha's brother Lazarus, where Jesus came and resurrects him. And so the first evidence of worship here is in the 4th century already, in the 300s. And the tomb is identified then. At one point they built, and so here's the tomb. You can see the old stonework around it. And let's see, here it is. It was composed of a vestibule and then a burial chamber, quarried in the soft rock of the Mount of Olives, because it's pretty soft rock. Traces of the original tomb be traced, at least 14th century. In 1384, they constructed a mosque that blocked the original entrance, so later on they dug a new entrance to it. And so we're going to go down. You can see where the steps going in and around, and the vestibule, and then back into the on a lower level. This is down into where the actual tomb is. Okay, so this is down the stairs. So we're taking in small groups, going in and out, because not too many people can get down there at once. Oh, death is swallowed up in victory. So cute little poem. This is looking down into the burial chamber. Tradition has it that he was in the tomb, the leftmost of these alcoves where they would put the bodies. And so that's the tradition, that he was in that one. So the leftmost one of this. So they're down in there. I'm on the slightly upper level because it's really hard to get into, and I decided I didn't really want to try, as they're looking at, because this is the area trying to get out. You have to sort of crawl on your hands and knees. And I wasn't sure my butt would fit, actually. And then the stairs as we're heading back up, you can see the way they curve around. So then we're back up and down the stairs, and that church that's right nearby is the Church of Lazarus, St. Lazarus. So Mary, St. Lazarus, St. Martha. So remembering them. More modern church again. Let's see, the current church was built in 1950s. A Greek plan. So they got title to it in the 1800s. Okay. So, has a lot of mosaics and very pretty, really. So more modern. I am the resurrection and the life, as you'd expect. Let's see, this is the main altar underneath. Angels there, I guess opening the tomb for Lazarus to come out. Let's see, on the side here is sort of been, Lazarus come out is like is last one he's saying, come forth. And so let's see, so Lazarus coming forth from the tomb. And then again, I am the resurrection and the life, a close up. And then Martha, Martha. And it's like, yeah, you are worried about many things. Okay. Looking up at the dome. This is not the Last Supper scene. This would have been a scene of, but at table being served. And what's interesting is, this is Judas challenging the oil. That's right, the oil being poured on Jesus. Judas, and then this would have been like the innkeeper. So you notice everyone else has halos except Judas and the innkeeper. Found that fascinating. So then we're hanging out, as we're getting ready. A few people went to their restroom quick between. But then looking at, where it is now, but the original church built in the 300s, testified by Saint Jerome, was 3 small naves. Okay. And Lazarus' tomb is nearby, and this would have been the entrance at that point. Second church was built in the 6th or 7th century, a bit bigger on top of what was the first church, and again next to Lazarus' tomb. And then some of the stonework around there. As we're getting ready to go around to the other side, there's a small convent it was, but now it was an early convent, was what they think, but now it's a little museum. But it has the 3rd and 4th churches. Oops, sorry. So 1113, the 3rd church. So here's the present church. Again, there's the tomb, which you can't get in the way it used to be because it's been blocked off. But then, big, huge monster church at 3rd and 4th church were very big around there. A large Benedictine monastery was annexed to the building. So at that point, so they think that the monastery that were, so the part of what we're going to see soon, that they made sort of a little museum out of, was part of the monastery of the 12th century. But it was a female monastery. That's right. That was the thing as I was remembering. Queen Melisende, I guess it was, for her sister set it up. Okay, and so they have little parts of it, and so there's a little chapel built into some of this, and they had one of the old grinding stones, and one of the old presses there, and was interesting, and just interesting wood that they made that out of, and fastened together, and a little knob in the bottom where it could turn finely. And there's another little chapel. This one actually had a place where you could have mass because you actually have pews in this one. And that's the door. Looks like Martha and Mary. Martha's serving and Mary's sitting down at the feet. And as we're coming out, there's just some of the stonework, some of it from way back, little pieces left over. But a nice little garden right there. Then we're back by the bus and the camel. But here's Martha and Mary's souvenir store right next to there. 50% discount t-shirts. I don't think by then we were shopped out enough that we were not, I don't know hardly anyone went into there. But then we're heading in, You can see some of the area around that we're just taking in as we're in. There's the Dome of the Rock on the left here, because we're in Jerusalem at this point. Back to the Ambassador Hotel. We had lunch there at one time when we were in Jerusalem, and so here we are having dinner there. Our final dinner has a nice little courtyard. It was a little cool, but they're serving us in a very nice. The food was put on the table, served family style. Most of the places were actually buffet, but this one was family style. We had some wine on the tables, and Jerusalem Winery, and some pictures of us as we're getting ready and finishing lots of food, that was for sure. And there was, I forget what they were sort of raffling off, and so whoever it was won, and so they're like, woo! And sort of, just a mosaic they had on there, just the tiles, painted tiles, I'm sorry. And this is our last picture. And then we headed to the airport, and I was too tired to take any pictures. None of us did, which was interesting. But it's like, who cares about an airport when you saw the Sea of Galilee?
Right.
So that is it.
Very good. Thank you so much.
That was another fun one. So yeah, so for me, again, today we covered the ones that I found the most exciting, which was, the Church of the Annunciation, that vocation, that sense of, Mary, sort of, you get the sense of being scared of what's going to be happening, but no, yes, your will be done, and commitment following through. And then primacy of Peter, where it was, saying to Peter, feed my lambs, feed my sheep, and right on the shore of Galilee, but being fed by Christ to be sort of like strengthened so you can go do it. So this was really an exciting several days for me through all of that. And you get home and exhausted, and so then I saw everyone at the, after sleeping 2 hours on the plane, the next night was the Mardi Gras. Back in just to see sort of the end of it by the time I actually got in. And then went and slept for about 12 hours. But, well, thanks very much for
thank you.
Thank you.
in doing this. So
Thanks.
take care.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.